Okay, so let's get started. So welcome everyone to tonight's presentation. We're very lucky to have DANITA Green with us tonight. She's a transformational storyteller, an author, a playwright. She's also a trauma-informed care specialist, and she's also co-founder of one of the groups of Coming to the Table, which is a group that's committed to racial healing. And you have just such an incredible background. Please feel free to add and share even more about your wonderful credentials. And so before I turn it over to DANITA, I'm just going to presence that I'm going to mute everyone so that nobody, comes in and makes a crash in the space accidentally. And I'm going to keep everybody muted until probably the end whenever DANITA asks for questions to be asked. So, and we're going to do like we have been doing, is asking for questions to come through the chat, because it's just much easier, because having to have people unmute themselves, and we found that it works much better to have the questions answered through chat. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to DANITA. And just wait 1 second, I'm already lost on, wait 1 second, I'm gonna mute, and then I have to go back in and unmute you, I guess.
Wait. Oh, I think I did it.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I'm still suffering through the learning curve of Zoom. You guys, even though I do probably 3 or 4 of these every single day, it doesn't matter. I'm still learning. Well, thank you all. I have had a wonderful time learning about your school. It reminds me of my graduate program. My undergrad, I went to University of Virginia. I'm a native Virginian, native Richmonder. But graduate school, I went to the Maryland University of Integrative Health. And I'm hoping that some of you would have heard of that school. It's a very transformative place as well. Great. I'm so happy because when I was there, no one had ever heard of it. And I went to get a degree in transformative leadership and social change. And of course, as we used to say, my well-heeled friends would say, "Oh, you don't want a job at all." So now I'm happy to say that I work quite a bit with this degree in leadership and giving people another way of thinking, being, and doing and seeing the world. And I am just gratified to see that this work is happening not only all over the United States, but now all over the world. And people are seeing the value in having the educational space and crafting new ways of speaking and acting, walking, talking, and doing that are leading to more diversity and inclusion. So, yay, us all over the world. And even in this time that looks so chaotic, I think that the truth seekers and the healers that we are on this call can recognize this time as a great shaking, a maneuvering, of a moving, shaking things up, breaking some things down so that we can build them back up to something that is more healing and something deserving, something more welcoming to all of us, and something truly evolutionary. So I applaud you all. Yay, you guys. And I am going to talk a little bit about coming to the table because, um, like most folks who do this work, the work of racial healing was something that I didn't sign up to do. I did not choose it. It chose me. I'd always wanted to be a writer. And I have written 3 books. I've been a writer for 30 years. I've written plays, and had a few of them go, go around the country. And so I was satisfied with that. I
Yeah.
started a small publishing company because I'm very conscious of wanting small voices to become big voices, voices that are sometimes go unheard. Wanted to be able to give them audience to be able to be heard in different places. So I was very, very happy doing just that. And then coming to the table came along. And as some of you may have heard, I do live in Richmond, Virginia, which is the former capital of the Confederacy. And we're known in some corners for still fighting the Civil War here. However, I like to think that where we have people who are fighting on one side, we have people who are healing on the other, and there's a dynamic of learning that's going on all the time. So for that reason, I'm very happy to be in this place of coming to the table. And I'm glad my friend and colleague Chuck is here with us tonight, who was a long coming to the table person. And I'm just glad to be here. So how come I'm a storyteller? Well, stories are definitely transformative. You can teach so much about values and constructs and different ways of being and doing if you can take a person outside of their emotional space when it comes to their own story and think about someone else's. My first and only novel is called Love Lockdown: Women in Relationships with Incarcerated Men. And I gave it that title, and it sounds kind of sexy, but it really is about women who are wives, sisters, mothers, daughters, aunts, whatever, in some kind of relationship with someone who's incarcerated, and how often um, women hold a special place in the community as far as holding families together in communities. Not always, and I know that's a generality, but this book was dedicated to them because I worked with the women's population in what used to be called the Richmond City Jail. And I'm happy to report now that one of the transformative things we've done here is to change the name of the jail to the Justice Center. So we have a Richmond City Justice Center now instead of a jail. Yay, us. So people can have a different experience when they are locked up, and the families who are coming to visit can have a different experience too. But while I was working with that particular population of women and some men, I did work with a few men. Um, it was hard to get them to talk about the excuse me, the deep wounds of their relationships and how their lives had been changed because of a loved one that was serving time. And it was much, much easier to introduce concepts in the book through the characters, the 9 characters, the women in the book who were going through these relationships, the mothers, the sisters, the children, the wives that were grieving and actually having their own experience of being locked down emotionally and economically, a lot of them socially, because that significant person was locked up. And by being able to introduce those concepts through those fictional characters, it helped the women in the jail open up like flowers to talk about the things that were really hurting them. So I said to myself, what if I could take that same method of learning into another construct that is pretty difficult. Well, I say everywhere, but particularly here, which is my experience. Could I take that concept of using objective storytelling to transform conversations that are deeply seated and rooted in people like race? Um, so that's what I do. And I have a collection of stories that people say I sneak up on people to talk about about race topics, but coming to the table has really been a great, great opportunity for me to do that because the whole concept of this organization is built on the novel and the gem of storytelling, and not necessarily trying to tell the story of all of history, but trying to share personal, authentic stories, usually at a round table and pre-COVID, um, over a great hot meal, which is, if you don't know, the best way to do it. To have contentious conversations, have food there. It makes it much better. So it was, coming to the table was an authentic and reasonable journey for me to be able to help people to share their personal stories at the table. And of course, as I began to strive to teach them, I learned a lot of things myself. So this is the learning curve here. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. I'm hoping that I can. Um, I don't know. Ah, can you see that?
Yes.
Oh, great. Somebody said yes. Woohoo! Okay. Um, coming to the table. Our table literally has four legs that we build this concept on of sharing the stories. Um, uncovering history, which sometimes we call truth telling in history, which is, again, not necessarily telling the story of history, hundreds of years of history, but that's definitely a part of it. But sharing personal histories, things that we know, things that come from deep in our psyche and our hearts about our experience in whatever skin that we're in. Okay. The second one is making connections. And sometimes we call that building relationships or bridging relationships. Being able to talk to each other from a place of similarity first. These are the things that we can agree on, and the other things we can mold and make. The third one is working toward healing. And this is probably the hardest part. When you're sharing very personal stories and what we like to call a safe space of confidentiality, we encourage people for their own transformational good to be as authentic as possible. And as it turns out, a lot of times it's easier to be authentic with someone in conversation that you don't know. That you tell things at the table or on the bus or in sitting on a park bench with somebody that you know. You share things with those people sometimes that you wouldn't share with your sister, you wouldn't share with your father, you wouldn't maybe share with your husband or your wife. So to be authentic gets people to a place where they can be so genuine that we allow them the privilege of sharing their pain. Sometimes it truly is a privilege to be able to do that in a safe space. And then we feel after you have learned something in the history, you've uncovered some details, after you've made some kind of personal human connection with someone else, hopefully somebody who's different from you, um, in some ways, not in your normal circle. After you have really bared yourself, said one or two things that are authentic to you that maybe you hadn't shared, and you have that feeling after, I have let that go. We're hoping that after you've done those three things, you are willing to take an action toward your own healing. And you ask yourself, what can that action look like? What does that action look like? Well, it could look like many different things. Um, if it's your first time telling a personal story that lays you bare in some ways, in order for you to heal, that in itself is an action, and we bow to that. We bow to that. Um, and then we want you to take that a little further. What can you do to help someone else um, take an action? What can you do in your family to help them open up and lay down some hurts that they've been carrying for a minute or a generation? What can you do in your community to help dissolve that conflict sometimes that comes with colonization or gentrification as here in Richmond? What can we do to help people to move forward? How can you take your new learning, your new actions, your new ways of being, your new avenue of healing into another realm? So these are things that I have adopted from coming to the table in my work with the race conversation, but also now in the trauma healing conversation since COVID. As Lisa mentioned before, I am a trauma facilitator and healer with the Virginia Department of Health. And we have been inundated having these conversations, facilitating these conversations with families, particularly our children who don't understand what's going on in the world. Some of them are quarantined with folks that they wouldn't want to be locked up with 24/7, and school was their refuge. So, giving our most vulnerable populations the opportunity to share stories in this way and to be authentic um, has been invaluable. We have even been talking here. I don't know where everyone else um, comes from on this call, and I would love to see where you're from in the chat. Um, Here, we have even had the conversation in several of our school systems in Virginia to take out the academic piece, at least for this coming semester, and focus on stress and anxiety relief, being able to collect the stories or give the children and the teachers and the staff an opportunity to unfold and unwrap all of these things, um, be, being able to tell their truth first, what they have experienced in the history of this 9-month experience. What connections have they made through Zoom or some other format? Letter writing, which I hear people are doing now again. Yes, my grandmother was right about that. What connections have they made within themselves? Okay. And how has that contributed to their healing? Okay. Are they being more active in waving at the neighbors from across the street? Are they appreciating the folks who deliver packages to their door that much more? Are they talking nicer to telemarketers who may be the only person they talk to all day? How are you connecting? And how are you dealing with your own healing? Are you planting flowers in your home or outside? Are you picking up the phone, which is happening a lot lately, and talking to people that have come into your mind that maybe you have been holding a grief story about or with for ages? One of the greatest experiences I've had since this Thanksgiving came in, the holiday, was people said that they talked to people that they had not spoken to in 20 years, 10 years, a lifetime. And just to hear someone say, I was just thinking about you, that's all, can dissolve a lot of conflict, can erase some grief. And I know for some of us, including myself, I forget why I was mad. So all of these things come into play when it comes to transforming personal harms. I'm going to see if I can move over to the Coming to the Table RVA website for a second. Can you guys see that? Uncovering history, sharing our stories. This is the website that we have in Richmond, and making a difference right where you are. We have a lot of people who are actually coming to our site now and saying some of the things that I just mentioned as far as wanting to connect with folks and not knowing exactly how to do that. Looking at our page, this is our vision, okay? Our vision for the United States is for a just and truthful society that acknowledges and seeks to heal, which is the most important word there, from the racial wounds of the past, from slavery and the many forms of racism it spawns. But do you know that when you set out to heal one thing, it usually heals something else? So when you have people coming to the table to heal their construct or their relationship with race, a lot of times that also means healing the relationship with your own family who shares the same pigmentation that you do. It may mean healing a relationship that comes from further back, your history, being able to pick something up and recognizing the pain that it may have caused for several generations and then putting it down. So a lot of different healing happens there. Our mission is to provide leadership and resources and support in a supportive environment. And that's where we have the facilitation comes in. We have trained facilitators. Richmond is very fortunate to have a team of 25 trained facilitators. We do training every month. And not only do we encourage people to come to our table, but we, at least pre-COVID, before the lockdown, we were able to work with our police departments. We were able to work with our public health officials. We were able to go into gentrified communities and talk with the folks the newcomers in the neighborhoods that were having severe problems with the neighborhood stakeholders, the people who had longevity in those communities who feel that they were being put upon by this new energy that was coming in. And so, again, with all of those activities and all of those opportunities to heal, we do it the very same way. And that is, we start with truth telling and we listen to all sides because everybody has their own truth, believe it or not. And sometimes those things are far, far apart. But I guarantee you, in some places, they also intersect. And so we allow people to come together and speak their truth and listen for the points of intersection. For the points of intersection. So, very briefly, oh, and Lisa, I'm going to need a timekeeper because I talk a lot. Okay. Just letting you know.
Okay, so just so I'll be really clear, when would you like the time? Like in an hour or sooner
Well,
or?
about 7:15.
Okay.
Okay, unless I'm in the middle of a story, but
Okay,
around that
got it.
time. Okay, so in about a half an hour, give me a heads up there. So we get to the truth telling part, and I'm not gonna. There's a lot of verbiage here, and I won't go through it. But if you were to come to our site, you would be able to see people who were very openly talking about um, facing their own histories. And again, most of it is about the construct of race, but you cannot do this work without doing the inner work. And as it says here, we are researching, acknowledging, and sharing personal, family, community, state, and national histories of race with openness and honesty. And again, there is no way that you can do this with one group. Like if as an African American, as a Black person, I can't explore what I feel another race may have put upon me without being accountable for myself, my family, my own contributions to the story, and those people around me. Um, as we talk about race, and I'm sure Chuck can tell you that we realize that even though in this particular case, we identified the enslaver as being European American or some people who may identify as white, we are also very, very aware that it was those same people that helped contribute to the freedom of people with dark skin. There is always the yin and the yang there. And what happens when we get to places of conflict, one story has overridden the other one. One story has overridden the other one. And so at the table, we'll be able to bring all of those elements together and see clearly what is the truth here. Um, what is the story? What things can we agree on, and we can build on? Then we move to the connecting. I'm hoping these links work. Oh, all right. I'm not playing any videos, but they help us to definitely see and understand in the connecting the similarities, and also makes it crystal clear what things in our relationship. Again, we're talking about race here, but this is any relationship. What things in our relationship, what factors do we have to work on? So, as says here in connecting, we are connecting with others within and across the racial lines in order to develop and deepen relationships. So, when we are talking about transforming any kind of harm, if it happened yesterday, if it happened last week, if it happened 200 years ago, we have to be willing to connect with where we are right now and move backward in a way so that we can adequately, as best we can, see what has happened, what failed, what um, what constructs did we fail to see, what story overrode another story, what beat down another story. How did we lose balance? How do we lose balance? And that only comes in the connecting and building the relationships. And then we move on to the part again where nobody really wants to do. Everybody wants to be healed, but nobody wants to work toward that, because the only way to do it is to examine the pain and the hurt. What about the dialogue that you had with someone, or a family member before COVID, or a teacher, or anybody? What was there that created a pain, um, or a source of doubt that made you go into a place of conflict and go further in a place where there was no resolution? So we explore how you can heal together through dialogue, through reunion, if possible. Sometimes it's not. Through ritual and meditation, which I'm sure that you all talk about in your learning in your school, which is very, very important in this work, particularly now in COVID, when there are conversations that need to be had but can't. And sometimes you have to have some other way, some meditative way of having that conversation. Some people call that prayer, and I bow to that. Ceremony, art is another way, as you know, to have that kind of conversation and work that out on a canvas, work it out in a song, in a drum, work it out with a new hairstyle. Art changes things, and finding methods to move forward. So after you've done those things, then we want to take action. I love this picture. These two ladies I met at my beginning of coming to the table, the national gathering. It's Phoebe Kilby and Betty Kilby White, who have now written a wonderful book. I got the manuscript just a few days ago, and they want me to write a review, and I'm just so excited about it. But these are two wonderful women who, they don't share the same pigmentation, but they share the same bloodline, and they come from a very long, deep-seated historical story that, yes, has some tragedy and some great harm, but they chose to change the narrative. They chose to show up differently and practice another way of healing, thinking, being, and doing, dismantling the systems of inequity and injustice and oppression and racism that kept their families separate. So, and they have done this action for themselves, and they have been able to take that action out into the rest of their family, out into their local communities, and now they have taken the step to take that healing um, into another action with this book, which I think is phenomenal. Writing is another way of coming through and transforming from very, very difficult hurts. So, what I would like to do now, we can have some questions about particularly coming to the table if you like, and I would be happy to answer them. You can put those in the chat, and then I'm going to actually tell you a story because I have realized that it's unfair as a facilitator to ask other people to tell stories at the table, at coming to the table, and I don't share mine. So I'm going to tell my own personal story, and you guys will get to pick it apart tonight, based on what I've already gone over: truth telling in history, making connections, healing the wounds, and taking the action. So I'm going to pause for just a minute. So if you have any questions, we can look at them in the chat. Stop share. Okay. Oh, look at that. It's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Oh, and you're telling me where you're from. This is great. Whole places. I'm going to get tickets to all of these places after COVID. You guys have dinner waiting for me. This is great. Oh, Kathy, I have bought 2 tickets to California. I bought one for March 18th to go see my son for his birthday, and they closed down the doggone airport in Las Vegas. And then I bought another one this past, a few weeks ago. My son got COVID at work, yeah. So I couldn't go see him, but he's fine now. He's great. But I don't know. I can't seem to get to California. Okay. And we got a Virginia here. That's wonderful. Oh, I love Naples, Florida. That's great. Colorado, I'm trying to get there. Seattle, thank you. Indiana, beautiful. Philly, woo woo. How about them Steelers? I'm still with them. This is great. Maine, Illinois, New York. This is awesome. This is great. Thank you so much. And let me go down because I'm going to keep the chat so I'll know where you are. Oh, Charlottesville. Yes, I lived there for a while. Okay. This is awesome. Dallas, by the way, of Cincinnati. That's quite a curve. This is wonderful. Okay. How can someone join one of the virtual CTT communities around the country? Well, we have a website, and when we were meeting in person, we had as many as 80, 90 people come to dinner, and that's a lot. And we are missing that fellowship. But we have learned how to do this online now. So our family has increased. We have several online events. We have 2 we still call them dinner gatherings. We ain't eating no dinner, and we still call them dinner gatherings. But it's because it's during the dinner hour, and sometimes people come with their food and they share, virtually, however you want to do that. So you can go to our website and you can register for to get our newsletter, and you can come to one of those gatherings. We have 2 book circles. That means, we read a book every month, and we have 2 different book circles. One is more toward reparations, and then another one is more popular works of fiction and nonfiction. So you could join one of those. We also have a very popular movie circle. And we use the word circle a lot in that group, and we don't use club. I did not know that there was some racial tension around the word club for some folks. So we try not to use that word, but we have circles. So you are welcome to get our newsletter or go to our site and look at our events calendar and see what's going on there. And we have people from all over, everywhere, that belong to come to the Table-RVA. What techniques do you have to encourage vulnerability? In formal workplaces, I found it difficult to break into, other cultural groups, as they would meet only among themselves. Well, you'll love this. I am co-CEO of Coming to the Table, and Coming to the Table is at best 78% of European American or white American, and I lead this organization. Um, I say that storytelling helps, and when people are able to see and witness your own vulnerability, um, and I smile a lot, as you see, that helps. Um, I I come face forward to the work all the time. Um, and I try to model what I'm asking other people to do. Um, there is truly a lack of trust. Um, I will say this is again a generality and not to offend, but a lot of time is a lot of distrust between African Americans and European Americans, particularly here in the South. Um, so I have to come very raw, and my European American counterpart, I have a white counterpart. She often says that she just has to keep coming like a bad cold. So she's not easily deterred, and sometimes you have to keep coming. It's just like I have 5 sons, and I come with my feminine energy, and sometimes they rebuke that to death. But I have to keep coming. I have to keep coming until they see my um, till they what I say till they recognize that I am always bringing love to the fight. Um, I know some people don't like the word fight, but I don't like the word struggle, because struggle to me sounds like um, it's going to go on forever and forever. of ev- Nature has taught us that things have to be chaotic. They have to clang sometimes. They don't just come together gracefully and move forward into wonderful outcomes. They come together like this. They make a sound. They make an impact. So in my being, in my space, in the Danita space that I'm in, I just have to keep showing up um, until somebody can see my most authentic side, my reason. And so that would be my answer to that. Just don't give up. Just because when you, as you know, when you walk into a space, you're already walking into somebody else's story. You can't help that. You're walking into somebody else's way of thinking, being, and doing that someone else has probably set that wheel moving. And so you've got to work not only to introduce yourself, but you've got to dispel whatever that energy was. You have to start moving that out of the way. And people, when they start to see your authentic space, um, it may take a while, but it happens. We had now, this is some real truth bearing. I'm going to do now, laying myself on the cross. I've talked about how we have these wonderful cross racial talks, but we had a really hard time getting Black people to come to the table to talk. And there were several reasons. For one, they didn't want to talk about some of the things that had happened in their families and that were happening in the race story in their lives currently. That's hard. I mean, you go to work all day and have to deal with the man and the money and all these things, and then you're going to sit down and spend 2 hours talking to people and say, "Oh, I didn't know you didn't, you were having all of these difficulties." But that's hard work. Also, we are a volunteer organization, and we have learned that volunteering is a privilege. Volunteering is a privilege. And a lot of folks who really, really, really need to be at the table don't have the time. They don't have the space. They don't have the energy. So, fortunately, through very kind donations, we've been able to not necessarily pay, but help out a few folks um, and treat them as the scholars that they are for bringing their wisdom and their stories and sharing their unheard stories, the voices at the table. So not necessarily to compensate them, but to gift them and let them know how much we appreciate them. Um, that has helped. And in a weird way, COVID has helped bring more African Americans to the table, people who did not want to come, because they also want to do something to move all kinds of conversations forward. They can see that this is the time for change. So I don't know, my grandmother used to say, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it until it happens. And know that when you put the energy out there, the universe responds to that in its own time, but it does respond to that. And as you are moving to a certain outcome, know that the universe is moving toward you with that same outcome if it's for good. So we're happy about that. Okay, what is this? Do you walk in a space as a human or a race? I do. Do you walk? Okay, okay. Or age, race, and would that make a difference? I like to. I like to think that I am a human that walks in the space as a human, but I'm often identified by others as a race. And sometimes I have to deal with that before they can see my humanity. I'm hoping that makes sense. Um, in fact, I walk in space. A lot of times I've been told that's binary, neither male or female. That's not black, white, indigenous, nothing. Um, and um, I walk in my humanness, but there are some people who are only going to see whatever it is they see, and I'm not really put off by that. I address that first, and then I move on to my back to my humanness, and hopefully they come with me. So I think that's it. Oh no, it's not, Sister Danita, but it's complete sense. Thank you. Okay, wonderful. I look forward to having you one day, maybe at the house. I'll put my best china out for you. That'd be great. I would love to see you. So, what I would like to do is to share a story, and I don't know if I'm going to be finished the story by 7:15, but I'm going to try. And again, I do not ask people to tell personal stories at the table unless I'm willing to do the same. So this is a personal story. I'm often asked, and we do this too. In fact, I'm going to do this now in the chat for those of you who want to answer. We usually ask people to go back and think of their origin story when it comes to race or any time they have been identified, just as we just talked about, as the other or something other. Um, Usually that happens early on in life when somebody identified you as, oh, you've got red hair. None of us have red hair. Or, or you've got red skin. None of us have red skin. Or you're short. Or you're fat. None of us are. Whenever you've been identified as the other, okay? And I'm just going to ask you guys who are willing to put one word in the chat how you felt when you realized that you were identified as the other, or you were able to identify someone else as being the other, something other than yourself. Okay. Wave if you would, if you understand the question. Okay. Okay. So one word. How did you feel when you realized that you identified as the other to some other people, or that other people were the other? Ah, yes. Mm, yes. Hurt, rejected, smaller, yes. Not as much as your full self. Loss of hope, awkward, isolated, yes. Yes, inferior, not good enough, fearful, depending on where you are, yes. Sad, invisible, separate, ashamed, ostracized, alone. So now I'm going to ask you another question. Oh, keep coming, keep coming. Stigmatized, humiliated, hmm hurt. Mhm. Now, think back to that same origin story. Think back to that same origin story. And we all have many, many times. It's not like it came to your mind once and it just went away. Oh, that's just something that happened. No, we've thought about that many times. What if the outcome of that story had been different? Say, for instance, if you had been othered, maybe if you had spoken up for yourself, and people would have, that moment of dis-ease would have dissipated and would have gone away. Or if you saw someone else was being othered, say somebody was being bullied at school, and you spoke up and said something, and the bullies walked away. Do you ever wish you had been a character in that story differently? And if you could have, how in your mind, how would it have worked out? And how would you feel now if you would have done any of those things that you wish you could have gone back and done? Does that make sense? Okay. If you understand the question, raise your hand for a second so I don't know. Okay. And put that one word that describes that moment in the chat. Empowered. Yes. Courageous. hmm Present. Yeah. You were there at the moment. You were participatory in your own story. Who knew? Aha. Relieved. Yes. A sense of connectedness. Strong. Strength. Alive. Whole. Yes. Authentic. I love that. Welcome. Beautiful. Yeah, natural and valued. Yes. Equal to what was going on. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. We all have a story that we wish we could revisit. And whatever story that is, whether we want it to or not, usually sets a precedent, I never said that word right, for so many other things that happen after that. Um, I would say that everybody on this call has had an other story. Um, Early on, usually it happens before the age of 10 or 15, 10 or 12. It usually happens when you're young. And it sets you on a path of viewing so many other relationships in your life. Just caring. Um, the work that we do specifically at Coming to the Table, and what I do as a transformative storyteller, is to give people an opportunity to go back and rectify that one crystal clear moment and change that narrative. What if this had happened? What if what if this outcome had occurred instead? And when you can do that, it helps you to look at so many other things in your life and how you have based so many of your actions, so many other relationships, so many other decisions based on that one uncomfortable moment of being othered, or um, that uncomfortable space where you felt powerless. Transformative storytelling gives you an opportunity to go back and get your power. What we do at the table is give people an opportunity to look at that story and not, you can't go back and change what happened, but you are still in that narrative every single day. You're still walking around in that same narrative. Transformative storytelling gives you an opportunity to change that narrative right now, right here, right where you are, right in your living room or right in your bedroom, wherever you are, and to move forward. Change that story. Just pick it up from wherever you left it and move forward. So I'm going to start a story soon. 7 minutes later than I said I would. Help me out, Lisa. I'm going to have to finish the story now. And I invite you all to close your eyes if you like, and just to breathe through it with me, and to listen, and to just connect in that way. I'm going to tell a story, and I want to welcome you in it. And when I say welcome, I mean you are welcome here in this story with me. If you are new to this group, or if you're longtime friends with me, you are welcome if you are comfortable in this place or finding your bearings someplace in history. You are welcome to join this story with me if you are a morning person or a night owl, or live on the East Coast or West Coast, or on another continent altogether. I just ask you to breathe in the possibility of being in the story with me, and breathe out any tension that you may be holding. You are welcome here in this story with me if you're disabled, if you are a Republican or a Democrat, some libertarian party, any of those parties. Bring the party here to me. You are welcome regardless of your faith, of where you live, or your belief systems. Let me guide you through this. I ask you to breathe in the newness of another story, and to breathe out anything that causes you to pause. I welcome you into this story, not knowing or caring what kind of skin you have, if your skin is smooth, or if it bears the map of your journey. If you are a woman or a man or a boy or a girl, or none of these labels will hold you, I welcome you into this story. Right now, each of you are welcome. All of you are welcome. And more importantly, all of each of you are welcome here. I don't remember much about my father. I do remember he was a tall man, really, really, really tall. And he liked to wear pleated pants, but the crease so tight and so fine that I used to think I could cut my finger on those trousers. He also used to wear a large brim straw hat in the summer, and he had a great big mustache that sometimes he let me touch and tickle. Other than that, I don't remember a lot about his features, his face, or even the sound of his voice. But I do remember the sound of him coming home in the evening after work in our 1957 Cadillac, the sound of him opening that big squeaky door and his big feet touching the gravel in our driveway. I remember him walking from the car into the mailbox and getting the mail out and shutting that old tin door. I remember him walking up the cement steps to our house. I remember him coming in the screen door and hearing it, bam, close behind him, because he kept promising to fix the spring in that door, and he never did. I can remember the sound of his footsteps going to the refrigerator and reaching in and pulling out a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. I remember him taking that beer and going out the back door, opening another screen door and hearing it go, bam, behind him. And hearing him sit down in that lawn chair and taking that top off of that beer. And then the sound of him taking that first big gulp, and then saying, ah. He'd put that beer down and then he'd sit for a while, just looking around, surveying the backyard, just like it was his kingdom. He'd go through the mail, come through the house. By that time, my mother'd be in the kitchen, putting the plate on the table for dinner. He'd give her a kiss, and we'd sit down to eat. My head would go back and forth between my parents. Not many words, just a smile now and then. My father cut his favorite piece of chicken or beef or whatever. And then we'd talk about whatever went on that day. They were always interested to hear what went on at school. Then later on, my dad would put back on his hat and he'd go outside. And he'd sit in the car for a long time and listen to the radio. I remember that car so well because in the summer, all the summers I can remember as a little 5-year-old, we would get in that car on the 4th of July and we would take a road trip down to North Carolina to see all of our relatives. We would meet on the beach every single summer, right at the 4th of July. I'd get in the back seat and see my daddy at the wheel on one side and my mama sitting all the way on the other side in that great big 57 Cadillac. And I would have the back seat all to myself because I didn't have any brothers and sisters back then. We would get on the road and in my lap, I'd have a shoebox that said Buster Brown. And do you think I had shoes in that box? Oh, no, sirree. I didn't have any shoes in that box. I'd take the top off and there was my lunch. I would have a piece of chicken, a real big fat roll that my mother made fresh, 2 chocolate chip cookies, and a big bottle of Yoo-Hoo to drink. If you don't know what a Yoo-Hoo is, you better Google that up. After I would have my little meal, I would sit in the back of that car and I'd watch my daddy driving, moving that big steering wheel. I'd watch my mother playing with the little buttons on the radio until she found a song that she liked. And when that song came on, they would just kind of look at each other and I could see their heads bobbing in syncopation to the music. And after I watched that enough times, I'd fall asleep, which was probably the reason why they did that. When I woke up, every single time we would be at the beach and there would be my whole family, my aunts and uncles and all my cousins that I hadn't seen in a whole calendar year. It was wonderful. I'd jump out the car with my curls bobbing all around and I would see these folks and they would look at me and say, my, Nita, how you have grown. And I could see my mama and my daddy's smile so big because they were so proud of something I didn't know. After a while, from all those old cars, my aunts and uncles will pull out a blanket and put it down on the beach, and there would be picnic baskets that would come out, and everybody would share recipes. Aunt Mabel made this. Aunt Maddie made that. Uncle Jed made this. And they would talk about news from down home and just cackle like hens. That's what my grandpa used to say. And I would see my cousins, my big cousins that were 8, 9, and 10 years old that lived out in the big city in Washington, D.C. And they would tell us about all their adventures. And we'd get into the water and we'd laugh and we'd play. And it was just wonderful. And we watched the sun go closer and closer down. And as it got closer and closer down to the horizon and the beach, the music changed. It went from being all fast and wonderful and playful to something slower. And all of a sudden, my uncle would grab my aunt's hand, my daddy would grab my mother's hand, and they would get all close and look at each other kind of funny. And my daddy would look into my mama's eyes and he would start singing this song that sounded sort of like, darling, you send me. I know that you send me. Darling, you send me. Honest you do, honest you do, honest you do. And he would sing in my mama's ear and she would hold his shoulders real tight. And I would just be watching them wondering, where is my daddy sending my mama? And why is she smiling like that? And why are they acting I can't go? Anyway, they would be dancing and hugging and dancing and hugging. And I would watch my Uncle Rudy and then realize my Uncle Rudy was dancing with some woman that was not my Aunt Helen. And just when I was about to bring that to everybody's attention, my Uncle Rudy says, well, now, I think it's time for these children to go take a walk on the beach. And he would reach into his pocket and he gave each of us, all 8 of us, a nickel. And he said, you take this nickel here and you go down here and you catch up with the watermelon truck and buy yourself a slice of watermelon. And y'all can sit on the beach and eat that. Man, you ain't said nothing then. That was the most exciting thing, the most exciting part of the whole trip. I had a nickel, and my nickel was just for me for watermelon. I started walking, and then my cousins, the ones I was telling you about before, said, wait a minute, Nita. I can show you how to get that piece of watermelon and keep that nickel. Okay, that sounded like a good deal. I didn't know how to do that. They said, don't worry. Come on, we're going to show you. So we took off running down the beach, took off running. And I heard my mother screaming in the background, don't mess up your hair, which of course I had already done. And then one more warning. Be careful that y'all don't cross the line. Well, yes, this was 1960s North Carolina. And people were always talking about lines. And I didn't understand any of that, but it didn't matter. I just wanted to be with my family and be on the beach and have some watermelon, have my nickel too. So we ran and we caught up with the truck. And as soon as we caught up with the truck, my cousin said, run faster. And so we were running after the truck. And then the man on the truck said, stop chasing this truck. We're going to stop a ways on, stop chasing. I stopped, but my cousin said, no, keep going. So we were running, trying to chase the truck. The man on the truck was yelling to us to stop running behind the truck. They started moving faster. We started chasing harder. They moved faster in the truck. We started chasing the truck harder and faster. All of a sudden, that truck started bumping in the back, and then the gate opened. And guess what happened? Fine watermelon fell off the back of that truck. We looked at each other and said, look at that. My cousin said, keep chasing. And we kept going. The truck kept going. Another melon fell off. Some other children saw what was happening. They came and chased the truck with us. Man, by this time we were hauling. We were running after this truck. Another melon fell off. By this time there were 20 of us chasing this truck. And that last melon hit the sand so hard that it burst into a million pieces. You talk about some kind of happy. And we sat down in the sand with our nasty little selves and started eating that watermelon piece by piece and looking around at all the children that had joined us who were not members of our family. They had yellow hair and blue eyes, and they were new to us. But one thing for sure, they showed like watermelon like we did. And we sat there with our sandy, sweaty feet and ate our fill and had the best time. There was a little boy with yellow hair and blue eyes and ruddy cheeks that sat by me, sat right beside me, and put a cup in front of him and said, "Let me see if you can spit those watermelon seeds in that cup." He'd spit one, I'd spit one. He'd spit one, clink, he hit that cup. I spit one and didn't go nowhere. He spit three more, clink, clink, clink. I spit one, didn't happen. And I started to get upset about that. After all, I was only 5. And he said, "Don't get mad, don't get upset." And I said, "Well, I'm not so upset about the watermelon seeds, but I've just realized I got sand all in my hair, and my mother is going to be furious." That little ruddy cheeked boy with the yellow hair and the blue eyes looked thoroughly at my predicament. He put his watermelon slice down. He ran down the beach to the water. He washed his hands. He came back, surveyed my nappy hair, and painstakingly started to pull each piece of sand out of my hair. It took him quite a minute to do that. I was so grateful. I looked up at him and I thought about how nice that was. I looked over to my right and I gave him my last piece of watermelon. He looked at me with the biggest smile and he said, "That's all right, you can keep it, because now you're just as pretty as a popsicle." I looked up at him and saw the sun behind his hair and it just burst into flames. He was so handsome. He looked down at me and saw my smile and placed a kiss right here on my forehead, right here. And I swear, I think I was in love for the very first time. I had a feeling at 5 that I didn't have for another 20 years. And it was a beautiful moment. And I looked back up at him to tell him so. But then in the background, I saw 2 grown-ups walking toward us. It's a man and a woman, and they were awful mad. And they had that yellow hair and them blue eyes, just like my new friend. And they were hollering and yelling and screaming them words that my mother had even said earlier. Something about a line. My new friend just looked at me and the smile left his face. And I saw the confusion. And he just shook his head and slowly backed away and said, "I gotta go." And I could tell he didn't want to, but those people behind him were waiting for him to leave me. And they meant for him to leave me right now. I sat there in my confusion. My cousins were all getting up and trying to figure out what to do. And all I could think of was, my friend is there. I want to go that way. I want to go that way. My friend is leaving. And my cousin said, you can't go that way. And he ain't your friend no more. He can't be your friend. But he is not. He can't be your friend. But he can't be your friend. And we done crossed the line. We all sat for a moment as the sun continued to set. And when it got so dark I could hardly see myself, we walked back to where my mama and my daddy and my family sat waiting for us. I was already confused, didn't understand any of this. And the worst part was yet to come, because while I was making a friend on the beach, something had happened that day. Outside of my presence, between my mother and my father. We got back in the car in silence, and we made that long drive back to Virginia. My mother said few words. My daddy had said none. And all I kept thinking was that someone had crossed the line. My parents were to divorce that year, and my life would never be the same. There were so many unanswered questions, and seemingly no one to ask. And all I could remember was that in that one moment, I experienced love in so many ways. And almost in that same fleeting moment, it dissipated like the air. How would it happen? I don't know. And now all I have left is the memory of something that went terribly wrong and forever would remain stale within my heart. Okay. It's not too bad. It's 7:30. So the reason why I wanted to share that particular story, which is a very true story, is because so often as we look at personal harm, generational harm, and historical harm, we have questions that are totally unanswered. And we have to live with those questions even as we narrate going forward. We will never have all the answers. Just as you contemplated briefly on the stories of your past, there's some truths that are still there that you carry, and some truths that are still unknown. There is some healing that can take place there. And perhaps there are some connections that can still be made. But all of those things are up to you. And the greater part of that is that if you can Go back and find those truths and discuss those with those people. If you can make those connections, if you have the strength and the audacity and the bravery, the courage to look at those harms, it's possible for you to take an action. But let's be real. There are plenty of opportunities that don't come that way. You may not be able to go back to that story. You may not be able to go back and have a conversation with the characters in that story that live in your head. Some of them may have passed on. Some of them may refuse to go back to it. They don't want to go back to that to discuss it. They don't want to connect. The pain is too deep. So that is where ritual comes in, prayer comes in, meditation comes in, where you are able to forgive yourself for not being fully present in a way that you could have corrected the harm or help facilitate the harm so it would not have happened. Which brings me to the last point. The thing that's always available to us when it comes to transforming difficult stories, difficult relationships, difficult narratives, the thing that's always available to us is the action. Always. You can forgive someone else for harm. You can plant a tree of forgiveness and reconciliation. You can take another family to the beach and watch the children play. I promise you, I have done that in my story. You can take an action to move that energy forward. And you will be amazed how not only will you change the narrative in that story, that personal story that you've been holding, probably maybe even like a chip on your shoulder, but it will change the relationship that you have with other things. This was a story that congealed race for me, which was unfortunate. But the biggest loss here was that loss became forever bound to my relationship with my parents. And quite frankly, took me into my adulthood, thinking about relationships don't last. You meet somebody, they care about you, they share their watermelon with you, and then they're gone. You know, I'm being facetious now. But those unhealed stories, if we don't go back and have some kind of ritual about them that contains the truth, contains connecting with other human beings, that if it hopefully will include a healing ritual and an action you can take, will make so much difference in the way that you look at your own life and relationships moving forward. So my clock says 7:35. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm hoping that the story helps, because even as I tell it, it helps me treat my significant other in a different way. Um, uh, it helps me reconcile a lot of things and helps me to stay in my human place of being a healing presence to others. So I thank you for your listening. Um, I am grateful too. I'm grateful for your hearing. Grateful for your hearing. And I think we have about 10 minutes for questions if there are any. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. As I shared with Lisa, one of the things that I was endeavoring to do before COVID was to actually record some of these stories and for practices for folks. So you can listen to a story. I think it's really easy to listen to someone else's story and objectively pull it apart and then apply it to your own lives. And I'm willing to do that for the healing of my folks and my city, um, all of you who I have come to love in the last hour in 7 minutes. Um, so hopefully that's a dream that I have. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to live that with you tonight. Thank you, Lisa. I'm turning your program back over to you.
Gosh, I'm really speechless. That was really beautiful, and I'm very moved, and I'm beyond words. So,
well, hopefully you'll invite me back.
would love to.
If I do come back, what I normally do, the four legs of the table that I reiterated several times, I do more of a deep dive on how truth telling comes through story and how that affects people, and the same with the healing and the building relationships, and then of course how do you take constructive action. All of those are separate. So you got a kind of overview right now, but all of those are separate healing stories that I have. I walk people through how to use those things to transform historical harms and personal harms, how to change the narrative. So on that, I just wish you all not just a wonderful holiday, but just know that everything that we're in and experiencing right now is worthy of our truth, our attention, our fullness. It is definitely here for us. Do not stand in fear. As Anais Nin, I think I never say her name right. Anais Nin says, life shrinks and expands in proportion to one's courage. I know that at Brennan School, you guys are in this place to be courageous, to be the loving warriors of what is to come, the healers, the transformational bearers, facilitators. And I have so much respect and so much hope and so many dreams that I want to live with you and through you. And with that, I do have my own website. You can visit me there, DANITA ROUNTREE GREEN.com. If I were a better marketer, I would have put that in the chat, but I'm not. See if I can spell my own name right. And I promise you, if you reach out to me, I will respond to all of you. I will value you in your wholeness and your individualness. Thank you for being transparent in the chat. I love asking people to do that exercise because it gives everybody the opportunity to come from their personal space, our little Brady Bunch boxes, whoever is old enough to remember the Brady Bunch, and then to add their feelings and solidarity and unity in the chat, and we can show up as one. Yes, courage is fear that has said yes. Yes, thank you. All right. I actually have another call I'm supposed to be on, believe it or not, so I'm going to go.
Okay,
and you guys
thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
You can talk about me while I'm gone.
Thank you so much, Danita.
In a nice way. Okay. Ashe and amen to all of you. So it shall be so.
Thank you.
Good night.